Welcome to episode 4 of the Racket House podcast, where we discuss all things music and success in our fun corner of the world. Speaking of fun, today's going to be a really fun one because I get to speak with somebody that I've built a close personal and working relationship with during my 5 years in LA, which have come to an end. And it's bittersweet, of course, but happy to reconnect with this guy because he's someone I look up to and respect in a multitude of ways, from his wizard-like production skills, his business savvy, his work ethic, and frankly, how much fun he is as a person. A lot of stories to tell another time. Not to mention his wife, Katie, who I've come to know very well over the years, and they're simply a power couple that I adore and aspire to be like one day. Not only is Jake someone who works tirelessly at his craft across a variety of roles in the music space, but he's about to be a dad. How about that? Bit of a long bio here, but Jake Clavette has built up an incredible resume, and I feel I'd be remiss if I didn't share all the highlights. So, since moving to Los Angeles in 2013, he's spent over a decade immersed in music, from starting his first business in 2016, writing music for TV, film, and other projects, to working with iconic brands like Ray-Ban, Tidal, Roc Nation, and Fox. He's built an impressive portfolio. As a producer, he's worked from 2014 to 2018, writing songs for pop artists, including the hit Cigarettes on Patios by BabyJake, which is gold certified with over 157 million streams on Spotify. Under the name Clavette, he's created music that's been supported by industry giants like Diplo, Claptone, Lane 8, and many others, amassing over 1.85 million streams on Spotify. He's also collaborated with artists like N2N, LEFTI, Boogietraxx, and Racket Club, that's me, and has been involved with an event production with collectives like Los Angeles Music Project and Top Shelf Disco, which is actually where we started working together, and we'll get into that. In 2022, he founded Stereopunks, focusing on organizing and producing premier events at top venues like Sound, 1720, and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. He's trusted by Houston Brothers Hospitality. He's curated unforgettable experiences for various properties and plans to expand across the country. Please welcome to the show a DJ, producer, composer, promoter, and a good friend of mine making waves in the music scene. It's Clavette.
What's up? Thanks for having me, John. Yeah, quite a mouthful there.
Yeah.
What is it? Jack of all trades, master of none. That's sort of been my time in LA as a creative. But yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to kind of get into it.
Yeah, you're a master of plenty. Don't sell yourself short there. So a lot of different avenues to talk about. You know, the goal with the Racket House podcast, for those either new or repeating listeners, is to really offer stories, tips and tricks, inspiration to artists, creatives, entrepreneurs, anyone who is really looking to, build their brand in the music space or just really get inspired by what people are doing. And there's no better inspiration, in my opinion, than Jake, just because, again, I know I'm gushing here as far as like the things I'm saying about you, but it's really true and it's from the heart and it's genuine. And I just, just knowing you for not even 5 years, and seeing your rise and growth across a variety of different responsibilities and roles is just incredible. So, I'd love to hear just kind of like where it all started for you. Kind of hear your story about how you got your foot in the music space, what really called you to it, how you kind of found your voice and your brand, and just kind of give us that sort of that layout there.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think most people that end up in the music industry, like music's just like a huge part of your youth. So I mean, it started there for me. My dad showing me records, discovering hip hop and getting into that when I was in like middle school and high school. And then I think where I sort of thought this is something I want to, I think there was a point where it turned from just I love listening to music to like actively learning and figuring out how to make that music.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really when I was in high school and discovered sort of that blog house scene, if you will, sort of the sort of electro punk kind of tones that you had with artists like Justice, the end of Daft Punk, all of the Ed Banger and French stuff that was coming out, Boys Noise, all that just like really kind of intense, punky dance music that sort of is coming back right now with like Billie Eilish and The Dare and all those artists. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of happy to see where that is. But that's where it all started. You know, and then I started making music when I was probably 17 and started DJing around the same time. And then through college, I had, you know, I had a gig at a bar at the University of Wisconsin at this venue called the College Club, which was sort of the big Greek bar. And as a sophomore, I was doing Wednesday nights there. That was my night. And then some weekends. But like that was sort of where I really cut my teeth learning how to not just play what I liked, and sort of started playing music that would keep the floor going.
Mm-hmm. Very important.
And you know, sort of just kept writing music, learning the ins and outs, and then got to the end of my time at college and needed to kind of make a decision, and had an internship where I was hoping to maybe move to Chicago, land a job with Shure, the microphone company, but that didn't pan out. So from there, you know, I was looking at either getting a job in Milwaukee, where I'm from, or you know, pursuing music. And I guess either way, it was always going to be pursuing music, but was it going to be sort of as a side thing, or was it going to be something that I go full in? And that's when I discovered Icon Collective, which is a production school here in LA. That's what got me out to LA in 2013. And I did their program, and it was still a fairly new kind of thing. Icon was maybe a couple years old at that point. They had just moved offices. They were in this kind of iconic older recording studio where like Michael Jackson and people had recorded. And, you know, my time there was spent sort of surrounded by the likes of like Nightmare, Jaws, Keizo, you know, friends that have now gone on to be, you know, big behind the scenes producers or artists themselves. So I was very like in on being an artist for most of my time from like high school to early years in LA. And from there sort of got into discovering like, oh, you know, there's other form you can like write behind the scenes. And so I started making pop music, started our own kind of like dance pop project with my roommate at the time. Started writing records for other artists, interning with, you know, an artist who was developing his own artists. And so I have like, I guess, always been interested in lots of things, which I think is why I'm sort of always spread out and doing all these different kind of endeavors.
What's okay? So,
well, yeah, there's a lot to probably unpack.
There's a lot there, right? And also shout out Shure Microphones. Also, yes. You guys suck for not hiring Jake, but also thanks for giving him to LA and allowing us to meet. So,
can you imagine if I was in Chicago, we would have never met.
Oh, we could play that game easily with if this then that, or if this didn't happen then that, you know. Yeah, I totally resonate with that. The upbringing on like a parent's music taste. And I didn't mention this in my intro, but Jake loves to wear like classic throwback t-shirts, like classic rock. And I wore mine today. I'm rocking the Dead & Co. Grateful Dead. Jake is not wearing anything similar, so I'm disappointed. But so you started learning how to DJ, and you mentioned writing music, but like how did that go about? Self-taught, like trial and error, like kind of what was your process to learn that from the beginning before Icon?
Yeah, in the beginning it was just self-taught, lots of YouTube videos. And then Icon was obviously more sort of instruction, more of a path and process and system of how to like become competent, write your own music, write your own songs, sort of. But it was like, you know, I think music production it's very tricky because you have to kind of learn everything at once. You know, some people, I didn't grow up playing music, so learning, you know, a keyboard was tied in with learning how Ableton worked, which was tied in with how mixing processes work. And how arrangement works. Like there's just all these things that over many years have sort of been simplified into being one person. You're the composer, the arranger, you're all these things. So it was mostly instruction at Icon, and then you never stop learning.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just been like, surrounding myself with the right people, making sure that like I'm sort of picking up things, trying to be in rooms where I wasn't always the smartest person in the room. Because I think, if you got to just kind of continue to learn. So it was still, even after Icon, lots of instruction on YouTube and like picking people's brains, having just conversations like, what kind of sample packs are you using? What's like a new plugin you're using? It was a lot of that kind of stuff. And then I think as I've gotten older, it's more just like, this is my process, and like I'm just going to sort of build a system that works for me. Because I think at some point, it's not that you just stop learning, but you sort of just like feel very confident in your system, right?
You figure out a workflow. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, and I resonate with that in a variety of ways. I mean, I grew up playing drums, for those who don't know, so I had no music theory background whatsoever. I can, I my strength is the rhythm section, but yeah, trying to learn Ableton was like trying to learn another language. It was like Braille. It's like you have to be part software engineer and then part, like you said, composer, somebody who knows how to play instruments, or at least figure out how to make, use the tools and tricks that technology allows you to do. But I also agree with you that, I went to a semester of IO Music Academy in LA, and super valuable. It was great. I'm grateful for that opportunity. But then I realized that my learning style isn't quite classroom setting. It's more one-on-one, and sitting with people like you and learning your tricks and just absorbing all that is really the best way that I've been able to learn. It sounds like you as well. And so I completely agree with that sentiment around surround yourself with the right people, and it'll help you grow and, never stop learning.
Yeah, I think it's, you nailed it. There's not much more to add there.
And so, but that wasn't the only music production school or instruction that you've gone to, right? You did Toolroom Academy.
Yeah, so I guess to kind of pick back up on the story, there was sort of a time period where then I started writing music for different TV projects, and
how did you get into? I want to hear how you got into that too, because and just real quick, in a lot of the conversations I have with artists, it's like they think there's basically just two avenues to make money in music. It's like produce your own music and release it and hope that you get enough streams to make a couple bucks, and then perform live and make some money that way. But obviously there's other avenues, and you're somebody who can share that experience.
Yeah. So the way I sort of came into it was I lived in an apartment with a bunch of creatives, or not an apartment, a house with a bunch of creatives. And two of them were a videographer director team. And so when they started doing sort of more projects with clients, they would hire, at the time, myself and my partner, my musical partner, to essentially score the videos, to add the music. And that was sort of when I was working in a restaurant at the time, doing anything creative and getting paid for it was obviously very attractive. So I would start bugging them all the time. And I guess the big break was sort of luck, but met with the right skills and opportunity. And my roommate essentially was hired as the creative director for an agency that had just poached Roc Nation away from the agency they had been with for many years beforehand. So this is around the time that Tidal had launched. Roc Nation is obviously Jay-Z's company, and so Tidal launches, and Tidal's kind of big differentiating value point was like, we're going to be hi-fi audio files, and we're gonna have just like premiere content. And they were almost early on it, if you think about it. Like back in those days, like content wasn't really talked about the same way, but they had all this amazing content they wanted to add from all of the Roc Nation artists and athletes and all that. And so my roommate was tasked with creating, filming, shooting, producing, and editing that content. And then I sort of was in the right place and at the right moment, having had some of that experience before he was hired there. I would get all these projects from them, and I scored like a 6-part miniseries for Andre Ward, who was a boxer who was making a comeback, signed to Roc Nation.
Oh,
And that piece originally lived on Tidal when it was launched, and then eventually Fuse. I don't know if Fuse is around anymore, but that channel, they bought the rights to it, and it eventually aired on TV. So I mean, like, that was a huge resume builder.
yeah.
So I think for me it was more like, I don't want to say I fell into it, because I think it sort of negates some of the hard work I did, but I certainly did take advantage of the opportunity, and sort of understanding the business of it a little bit, because when I moved out here, I think I've made a huge effort through Icon and my own sort of learning to understand like how the music business works. If I can advise, I mean, if I would recommend anybody listening who's like, I don't have a clue about the breadth of what the music industry looks like, Donald Passman's book, Everything You Need to Know About the Music Industry, it should be required reading. And it's kind of, I was actually at dinner with a friend last night who had been asked to basically speak at Berkeley, where Donald Passman is a professor, and he was telling me that even those students who they don't really understand how like publishing works, how recording rights works. So I think it's the biggest benefit you can do to yourself is to understand how the business works. So
yeah, I had a friend who worked at Wasserman, I think, the agency, and as a new employee, anyone hired is given the book and told to read it. So it is, for some companies and businesses, required reading. And I've read the book, and when I was managing artists, I would recommend they read the book. And yeah, it's incredibly valuable, because there are so many nooks and crannies of this crazy business that we're in. And I think the more you know and the more you learn, the more you can figure out how to be successful there, and maybe create some income channels for yourself too, if you're really trying to make it full-time in music, which a lot of the people I work with are. So super helpful. So and I want to comment on the piece on, obviously network, hate the cliche, network is net worth. But who you surround yourself with, again, we've already talked about it, is really important. But I think the unique thing about LA is there are a lot of opportunities to even live among people that are trying to do the same thing you do. And there are these houses of creatives, there are these houses of DJs and producers who all live together. And I think it's really special, and what makes LA unique, despite how competitive and saturated it can be. There is also so many collaboration opportunities. So I think that's great. And you talk about scoring music. I mean, you went from college bar DJ to teaching himself. Were you on FL Studio, or were you always Ableton?
I in college and up until Icon, I was using FL Studio, and Ableton
So
quickly was much better.
Right. So went from like this not to dumb it down, but like, amateur DJ producer, to going to a prominent music school, to then scoring commercial work for major entities. I mean, what do you think? Like, obviously the talent is going to be the biggest piece of this, right? You have the opportunity, but you have to show something for yourself. What do you think gave you the biggest piece of being successful with that role?
I think for me, I just didn't say no to anything early on. I think when you're starting off in this business, you don't really have that luxury. And I think it's also not advantageous for you to do so, because I think, I'll just kind of bring it back to the Donald Passman book a little bit. There's one thing you said, I was like thinking to myself, the real killer is not knowing what you don't know, right? Because like, I think for people, it's not that they like lack the skills to do any of the things I'm doing. It's just they don't know they can do it. And so I think by saying yes to almost everything that was brought my way, instead of like thinking like, well, no, I'm an artist, I'm not a composer. That's like sort of what just saying yes was the biggest thing. I didn't necessarily I guess I put myself into this situation by living there, and in certain situations saying yes was sort of a result of being there. But, after I started kind of building my resume with the Roc Nation and Tidal work, then I started pitching myself through cold emails and just literally networking, asking people, do you know music supervisors? Do you know music library owners? Do you, I would take meetings and lunches at all the odd hours of the day because I was just working in this restaurant, and, it was either a day shift or a night shift. So I would go grab lunch with people that owned music libraries. I would ask my now wife's, aunt who lived out here, hey, do you know anybody that I can talk to? So it was just like a real raw kind of hustle mentality, I think, that allowed me to sort of just be in the right place to say yes to those opportunities. And from there, it was just like always feeling like there's that David Bowie quote where he's like, you always want to be far enough into the water where your toes are just off the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like that was very true. And I don't think I absolutely internalize that quote, because I think that, going into one of the early projects I did in that world was a project for Ray-Ban.
Mm-hmm.
And the creative director came to me and said, we want it to be sort of rock and roll. We want it to sort of have blues, and we wanted to have all this. As someone I played a little bit of guitar, but as someone who is not even proficient with guitar, to be nervous in that point and say no to that project would have been silly, because it was what allowed me to quit my job in the restaurant. And instead of being like, well, how the frick am I going to do this? I make electronic music.
Yeah.
I can't possibly do this. What I thought was like, well, I got to go hire someone. Obviously, I got to hire a guitar player. And luckily, because I'd done all these pop productions and was still doing all these pop sessions, I knew 100 guitar players. So I was like, all right, I'll just go call my buddy Jackson, and I'll pay him. It'll be a killing for him too. The project paid very well. I was like, I can take a little less and hire him, and we're gonna create something really great here, and hopefully this will be just a good payday for everybody. So just say yes. I think that's what it boils down to.
Yeah. I've done that with even offered like DJ gigs. Of course, you want to be particular about like the type of opportunities you take in that world, but just sometimes I would overthink an opportunity. I'm like, what am I doing? Just say yes. Just take the opportunity, So I think that's really good advice. I think it sounds like you figured it out. It's almost like a sink or swim. You're like, okay, I have this opportunity. I have to crush it because this is my future. I don't want to wait tables anymore.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I think you gotta figure it out. I think that's what the universe rewards, is people that can be problem solvers.
Yeah, you're a problem solver, and you mentioned the hustle mentality. 10 years ish later, give or take, you still have that mentality, and again, that's what I've respected about you, and I think that's what's probably allowed you to grow your name in the music industry and grow your business so quickly with Stereopunks and things like that. So you're doing some commercial work for a while. What are the next steps? What's happening in your life now? How old are you? What's happening?
Yeah, so I'm probably, I was either 24 or 25 when I quit working at this restaurant, and then started sort of the first business around 2016, and that was just Cavalier Publishing, which was the pop name, the dance pop name that we were going under. So I was just like, I'll just throw it on the LLC.
And this is you
and that was
your housemates at the time still? Or?
Yeah, but then he dropped out, so it was just me. But I kept the name.
Yeah,
it was something for the Secretary of State's filing cabinet. Anyways, so you brought up tool room mechanics. So I just was hustling and building that business, trying to take as many gigs as I could, and that's where I had a good list of I made a really good network of music supervisors, library owners, and just was making decent money where I could essentially work in music full time. But the artist side of me started to sort of creep in, So that now we're plugging along like four years, right?
Right.
And the artist side of me is not being fed. So during COVID, or I think right before COVID, is when I was like, I need to get back to writing my own music. I'm sort of drowning in this client servicing that composing kind of is. And that's when I decided to kind of get back to my roots. Now, there was like a project before the house music stuff that was more bass oriented and also sort of a response to not feeding that artist side of me.
Mhm.
But
What was it called?
My true like influence in like start to this was Daft Punk. So I was like, when coming back to this sort of artist mindset again, I just said, what is home for you? What is it? It's not bass music. Like that was just you seeing that was hot at the time. And
by the way, for those who don't know Jake's early project, it's actually pretty good for like that bass world. What was it project called? Clavette.
Just again, sort of like a how spelled a little more phonetically, or at least I thought it was. Everybody can just kind of butchers it, but that's my own fault. But
it's impressive, I gotta say, objectively.
Very aggressive, very intense music.
Yeah.
I guess with the same sort of attention that I give everything I do. So, but I had some success with that project, and I knew that I could do something with house music if I just followed what was home, which was like Daft Punk and French house and all that, and really just house music, because I did love just all sorts of stuff back when I was in high school. That was anything with a 4 to the floor kind of pattern. So
same.
Again, like for me, a big thing is like investing in yourself. So of course, I found Toolroom Academy. I knew it was a label I respected. I loved Mark Knight and everything he's done. So I signed up for that. And I think that was also sort of early on. And I was like in the 9th class they ever did. So like, again, like only 2 years into that program. And, I think for me, it was just getting the chops up and again, seeing what I could take from someone else's processes and add them into mine. And I think that that's actually pretty key. Like for music makers, creatives, like you gotta, like everything is a remix, but you gotta, if you just copy someone's process, it's not going to really work for you.
Right.
It's going to work for them because that's their process. That's how they create their art. So I think that class really helped me sort of like figure out like, oh, this is like a better way of doing this, but it actually fits into my process in this way.
So two questions on that. So, well, maybe 3. I want to know like what was the biggest thing that you gained from doing Toolroom?
My wife.
My wife. Well, biggest thing you gained from going to Toolroom. I want to know like what, and maybe a bigger question is like, if artists out there are considering investing in themselves and maybe specifically going to production school, like what to look for, like what's really important in their shopping process. And then maybe something outside of the classroom that Toolroom gave you that you can't learn, like a connection or maybe an opportunity for a release or play in the radio show. So 3 questions. Apologize for that, but any order you choose.
Yeah. The first one was what was the most valuable thing I learned, right?
Yeah, and you may have already mentioned it, but like, from like a classroom perspective, like what do you think was the biggest ROI for you on that investment?
Gotcha. I think like honestly, like the confidence it gave me. I remember at the end of that project, or at the end of that course, they brought Mark in with oh wait, no, was it Mark? Well, it was either Mark or one of the like senior A&Rs at Toolroom.
Right.
And they brought him in to listen to everybody's sort of end of course projects. So it was just like a track we had made over the entire duration of this 2-month course or 3-month course. And they basically were like, we could sign this. This is so good. Like we could sign this. Now I don't know if they were just saying that because they didn't sign it, but you know, having that sort of a response from curators and tastemakers and influencers really in that scene was huge. So I would say like it just gave me sort of that confidence again that like, hey, you know, I know I can make this type of music. I know I can make it well. And I know that I can sort of perk up the ears of people that make those decisions to, you know, benefit that could benefit my career.
That's
So that was,
huge.
I would say, the biggest ROI.
Huge. Confidence and mindset is so important, and it's hard to unlock, but once you do, it's a whole new trajectory, right?
Yeah. I think the like intangible thing, I mean, it's sort of the confidence, but I'll go one more on that. I think like that class, we still have like a little Instagram thread, and we all support each other's music. And I actually met a few of the people in person. One of them is like one of the guys, this guy named Danner, is like crushing it in Boston. I think he's like opening for like Beltran and all of these guys, like,
Sweet.
you know, like a very unassuming DJ, like, you know, a little bit older than me, works in the financial sector, you know, and just loves like banging minimal tech and just like is a freaking dog in the studio and was just grinding so hard. And now he's like, you know, he's signed records with like Sosa's label and all that. So I mean,
Hell
like,
yeah.
and I met that guy when he was like still like, I can't believe, like when he came out here to LA and we met up, he was just like, he couldn't believe that people would believe in his music, you know. So I think like those connections are definitely the intangibles. And
Yeah. Shout out Boston, by the way. Hometown, baby.
that's right. What was the third question?
Third question, shopping, right? So, I mean, I don't even
what
know
to look for.
what to look for, you know. I'd say specifically for like a production school, but even maybe zooming out about like where to invest your money in growth, maybe so those two kind of avenues there.
I would say like, I think you're gonna want to have a conversation. If it's someone that won't get on the phone with you or on Zoom, I think that's a red flag.
Yeah.
Because this is you know, these are human connections, and learning has to be somewhat face to face a little bit, not entirely. So, you know, I think the different, like the through lines I saw in Icon and Tool Room Academy was like people were very eager to get on the phone, answer questions from the get-go. You know, transparency, seeing what things cost, seeing what curriculum looks like, how time frame of that curriculum, you know. I also think like you don't I think be wary of people that make sort of like lofty guarantees. You know, like I don't know how I would feel about Tool Room Academy if it would have said like, we guarantee you'll sign a record with like our label, or you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
that too lofty. There's certainly guarantees that I think if they make sense to you, then I think that that's fine. If someone makes that, like, we guarantee you're going to have more confidence by the end of this course. Yes.
Do you remember
Perfect.
Tool Room? Do you remember Tool Room making any sort of
I don't
guarantees like
think
that?
so.
No.
I don't think so. I think
Go
in
me-
general,
Yeah.
it's tough to make guarantees because
We
it's like, what if we don't
guarantee
know?
we guarantee you might meet Mark Knight.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's certainly helpful. And then okay, so those are some things to look for. Do your homework, basically. Do your research. Talk to people. And then, you know, outside of like music production, any other like you know, whether it's school, whether it's just like kind of investing in yourself, either something you've done that you highly recommend or just ways to think about that, because like I said, growth is just top of mind for a lot of the people that I work with and that are listening.
Yeah. Okay, so this is sort of I would say this is sort of how I've always approached things. And I'm gonna bring in golf here because I've gotten into golf in the last few years. And another sort of endeavor that is like requires a lot of time and a lot of attention. Now, I think in everything there are ways to sort of improve, study, train, practice, whatever you want to call it. I don't think music or like anything you get into is any different, especially if it's like sort of multi faceted. There's multiple things you sort of need to do, whether you're a business owner or you're a music producer, right?
Right.
So I would say, like, if you have this like kind of complex thing like the golf swing can be, you just, or the game of golf can be, right? There's the swing is not the same for every club, and like your approach on every shot is not the same, and every hole is not the same, and no golf course is the same, right? So there's all these different things. I think it's breaking it down and focusing on like one thing, and like having a consistent schedule to focus on that one thing until you sort of feel better with it or proficient with it. And, you know, I guess applying it to like music, one thing I would do is like I would carve out time to only work on sounds.
Mm-hmm.
And I would even get more detailed than that. It was like, I'm not going to just like sit down with a synth and like create some random sound, because that I would do that. And then I would find like my sound that I made was not as good as the presets that would be in the synth. Right.
Right.
So what I would do is I would like take like pop songs or like dance songs that I really liked to be like, oh, I'm going to remake that sound in that one part of the record. And that, I think, helped me get a really good sense of like, oh, this is how a synth works. That's how you make that sound. That's how you sort of make it do this, and that's what I would focus on in those sessions. And like,
Mm-hmm.
I would build that out over a month or so, and be really try to be as disciplined as possible in following that. Other times it would be, we're going to just work on drums. We're going to just work on organizing my template, or organizing where all my files are so that I can be fast, or like, I just am familiar with the sounds in here. Because like sometimes it's like, you don't want to sit down necessarily to create and be like, I don't know where anything is. I don't know. You kind of want to have that inspiration. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
finding stuff that inspires you, whether it's a record to sample or sounds in your library. Go through and get familiar with that stuff, and then like put it in its own folder so
Mm-hmm.
that you're like, you have this master folder of inspiration. You cannot possibly not be inspired when you sit down, right?
Right.
So that's how I would say is like the biggest thing is like, I'm a big systems person. I love processes because I think that that's what matters. It's not the end result, it's the process. Because if you refine the process to be perfect, like, I mean, not that you're going to have that or achieve that, but you will certainly have a better result than if you don't put that same focus on the process that leads to the result, right? So
Right.
like, I would always break down everything I've done to like, all right, what are the steps here? What do I need to improve on? What is lacking? What needs more attention? I mean, that's how I approach golf right now. It's like, I'm just gonna work on chipping because my chipping sucks.
Yeah.
Like, I need to be better there. So like, that's, I think, and look at like, I mean, this is now sort of getting a little too lofty, inspirational, but I mean, just like look at the best in anything, sport, creative endeavor, like, they got there through a process. So like, break down what it is. What is the smaller details of this that need to be refined that build this product, which like for DJs and music producers is like a banging track that everyone wants to play. What is it? Break that down. Get
Right.
analytical to a point where like maybe you wouldn't anticipate some other person would get detailed and analytical about. Like, try and figure out all this shit and copy. I'll just end with that. Like, I think learning from other people is the biggest thing you can do. And the best way to do that is by essentially like recreating their work, because you can figure out what it is that makes that record sort of tick. And
Mm-hmm.
once you know what makes a good record tick, especially like hits,
Yeah.
when you figure that out, then you sort of have the blueprint. And then it's just like, do you have the skill set to essentially do it yourself from there?
Well, just listen to David Guetta. He says it's the melody. Just make a good melody. It's easy. I do remember when we first, started, hanging out and working on music. I do remember you telling me about that was kind of your early days process about like just figuring out how to recreate sounds and songs. I didn't know the level of detail that you spent like actually dedicating time to like really focus on one seemingly small piece of the puzzle, but ultimately that ends up contributing to the rest of it, because I've heard the sound you make. I hear the drums and all the different layers you put on songs, and it's quite impressive. And that's what I think makes you such a polished producer, is because you took the time to do all that stuff and really study and become a master of your craft. So you say master of none, Jake, but you're a master of some things, let me tell you.
I'm a master of processes. That's, I think, what it is. Like, I firmly believe I could do anything as long as because I've learned how to learn. You know what I mean? That's sort of,
wow, that's
I guess,
deep.
my mentality.
That's a good soundbite. I've learned how to learn. That could be your book too. Learning How to Learn by Jake Clavette.
Learning How to, a forward by Simon Sinek.
Yeah, you can read the Mamba Mentality. I mean, yeah, there's so many greats out there who you can really study from across a variety of practices and functions. So thanks for sharing those pieces of wisdom. I mean, I think it would be great to like start getting into I think what's top of mind for you, your primary focus, just knowing you behind the scenes, is your brand Stereopunks, right? I want to make sure we spend some time on that, because for those who don't know, like Jake and I met through a mutual friend. When I moved to LA, I had spent time. I was in San Francisco for 5 years. The first people I really started vibing with and making friends with were in the music space. We created collectives. We started throwing this event called Pizza and Techno. It was just like a great vibe up in SF. And I moved to LA, and I was trying to almost recreate that sort of community. And I kind of asked around. I was like, who should I chat with? Who should I talk to? And some people, one person in particular recommended this collective called Top Shelf Disco, which at the time was just kind of like a DJ crew. Zach Rodriguez, Drake Atley, couple of founders that I've now become lifelong friends with. And yeah, I think pandemic basically shut down events, and they decided to start a record label. And I had some experience at a label called Build It Records. I really liked the record label vibe at the time, doing A&R, kind of scouting new music, doing marketing and partnerships, things like that. And then I think, through just Jake and I getting connected, I think probably first on Instagram, then we maybe had a call, and then we kind of both intersected at Top Shelf Disco. I think maybe for Jake, I don't want to speak for you, but it was I think heavily the name, because you were really into disco at the time. But we kind of joined up as like a 5-person team, starting a record label. And then we started releasing some music, but then events opened up again, and we started throwing events together. And I think like a team of 5 is pretty big, and a lot of chefs, a lot of cooks in the kitchen. But I think Jake and I kind of took the reins with a lot of the events we threw, and they were fun, and I'd say pretty successful. And then we started working on some of our own events. We threw a few parties at Sound Nightclub. We booked Ophia and Pickle and threw some parties there. And then Jake wanted to help me get Pizza and Techno up and running again in LA after the pandemic, and we did a bunch of parties there. But throughout that time, you basically came up with the idea of Stereopunks, and so tell us about like the inception, where the name came from, what your vision is. Like I think what I really want to hone in on is like how you've built this brand over the course of just a couple of years to where you're now becoming have become like one of the bigger promoters in LA. And obviously you have plans of going outside of LA and California. So like, just like, tell us what's up. Like, how did that all come to be? And like, success tips, like building a brand. I think lean into some of that stuff too.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
I think coming out of COVID, there was like this, again, like feeding that artist like hunger that wasn't being like, making the music was good, but like then performing it wasn't being met. And so I was like, I would pitch myself to Insomniac, and I would pitch myself to Framework.
Do you mean to perform?
Yeah, to perform. Yeah. And just like play at some of the like cooler clubs in the city. And I didn't really have much of a response. Mm-hmm. And so I think for me, a lot of times it's like, all right, well, if that's the door that's not open for me, where is it? Like, how do I make that sort of third door or side door action?
I like you talking about the side door. You're a big, yeah. You introduced me to the concept of a side door.
Yeah. It's just, I think like there's never, you're never like fully blocked out.
Right.
I think you got to just keep pushing. Right. So I guess for me, I was like, well, I love like my home obviously is this French house stuff. And I just was not seeing that being brought to LA at the time. I think this was like right when like Tech House and Fisher was just exploding. And it just, for me, it just wasn't like my, or at least that's like kind of West Coast style wasn't really for me. And so I was like, well, I want to bring the artists that I love here and I want to open for them because that's really just what I want to do. So the idea of like throwing parties, I think, was from there. I had a really good mentor, and still do, who's like a business partner now, Orlov. He's been,
Oh yeah,
Matt's been like a real teacher to me. And I think seeing sort of his love for what he does in designing experiences was, something that I also really loved. And, my wife also works in experiential marketing. So I think I had that. I was sort of surrounded by it because we were working with Matt before I started kind of working with Top Shelf Disco. And I think for me, that was what was like, all right, I'm going to do this now. We're going to kind of go in this lane. I really want to fulfill this, insatiable hunger I have as an artist. And this is the other element of it that's not being met. So,
yeah. And I want to just comment on a couple things there. First of all, like, I think, some of the biggest and best shows that I've played, not all of them, but have been because I've created those opportunities for myself as a promoter, as somebody throwing a party. If I'm going to book a headlining act and it's my party, I'm going to open up for them selfishly, right? Like, I'm going to put other people on too. But like, I think creating your own opportunity, like you said, like if door's not fully closed, figure out a way to create your own opportunity. The other point I want to just make sure that we don't shy away from is mentorship and how important that is. And there's no shame and there's no age too old or no skill set or function. Like everyone, I believe, should have a mentor because to your point in the beginning of the conversation is never stop learning. And if there's somebody who's been doing it longer than you or has expertise or has connections, find that person, learn everything you can from them. Maybe not copy them but try to replicate their success and model, your things after them. So kudos to you for, for latching on to somebody who can really help you.
Yeah. And I think like, why make the same mistakes as your teacher when they can, just explain why that's going to lead to their mistakes, like, I mean, some things you do got to go through, like you do got to lose on a party and get kicked in the gut and just be like, wow, that hurt, but that was a good party, So I mean, like there's certain areas you have to go through to kind of for them to set in. But I think so the name Stereopunks I mean, it's not the sexiest thing. It's not like I had a dream or anything. I think for me, I was like, let's do an exercise. Let's like write down I think I wrote down like 10 or 15 words that were like associated with music, I think. And then like 10 or 15 words that were like associated with sort of the appeal that I wanted the name to have, like the edge, I guess. I think that's sort of how I did it. And I started just taking these two columns of names and just being like, does that work? Does that work? No. Wait. And then I think Stereopunks just got lined up, and I was, obviously it's sort of aligned with Daft Punk. I mean, I'd be silly if I didn't recognize that, but it did not come necessarily from the fact that I'm just the biggest Daft Punk fan in the world.
No, you like punk rock, right?
Yeah. I love punk rock, but I think in general it was like, I felt the sort of events that I wanted to kind of throw initially was different and on a different path to what was being fed in LA at the time. So
differentiate.
The name sort of came from that. And then, I think the first event I threw was actually you played it, I think. Mr. Brightside which is sort of like my indie dance sort of throwback night. And you know, it's sort of like it's sort of evolved now, but I think that night our vision was like it's indie dance, it's blog house, it's like all 2000s and early 2010s kind of stuff. And now it really is, I mean, like, I think again coming back to like the DJ in me and reading the room, like the party really is an indie rock night. Like it's the Strokes, it's the Killers, it's Paramore, it's all that. And I think that it's been a party that's really fun to play because it's not traditional dance music. So
Right.
as a DJ, you know, someone who started out more as an open format guy, learning how to blend those songs is key. And sometimes you don't even really need to, you know, sometimes you can just throw on the next song and
Yeah.
it just works. So I think that was the first party that I kind of started, and it's a brand that I still throw and promote and you know, I'm trying to grow outside of just LA.
Sure.
But from there, I think for me, it was just like, all right, let me work with other people. Let me learn from other people. The same process I've had for everything else I've done. And eventually I sort of landed a residency throwing a weekly pool party through Friends of Friends. And I think I did a pretty good job there. I think it was okay. Some weeks better than others.
That was the
But
Ziggy party, right?
the Hotel Ziggy parties
Yep.
in LA, if you're not familiar. And you know, we had some cool bookings. We had Neverdall on there right as he was blowing up. You know,
Had
before
Racket
he
Club
had
on there, you know, big
Racket Club
name.
through some great stuff. Some top shelf disco parties.
Oh yeah.
Lupe Fuentes played one of our parties there.
Yep.
So it was like another sort of literally by mistake, I had opted into this weekly. I didn't read an email and didn't realize that I had agreed to a weekly. And you know, 2 lessons learned there. 1, make sure you read everything, especially the terms and conditions. And 2, you know, the lifelong maybe theme of this, just figure it out, you know. So like I eventually got thrown into a weekly that I was like, how the frick am I going to do this? Like, this is nuts. And we just put it together. And eventually I learned the process for how you put together a weekly.
Sink or swim, baby.
Yeah. So, and then I think from there, it was like, all right, I've got this talent buying kind of part of the business that I really love and want to expand. How do I do that? And then there was the other part, which was like, let's throw more of these kind of formatted parties that are a little less overhead and sell pretty well and are actually just fun as a DJ to play. And you know, essentially those are what, that's sort of what Stereopunks is. And I think in general, like my whole thing is creating concepts that are inviting, that are different, that are things that maybe don't rely on talent, but talent can be folded into. And you know, the mission I think with Stereopunks is again just creating premier experiences in the best venues across Los Angeles and then eventually across the country, and who knows, maybe even outside of the country,
outside of the world.
Yeah. But that's like how I mean, again, it's like I could go back through the story and keep going. It's going to sound kind of like everything else where it's like I just surrounded myself with the right people. I took chances I wasn't ready for, and
yeah,
you know, we're here.
You were on a mission, and I think like it's impressive. It's impressive largely in my opinion because of how much there is going on in LA. Like I use the word saturated or competitive, but like it's true. There are some really big name promoters that you're going up against in LA. And then there's certainly your mid-level people. And then there's even the smaller local people. You know, like there's always something going on. And we learned this when we were doing Pizza and Techno is even when you book a date on the calendar and it doesn't seem like there's anything you're going up against, there's always something you're going up against. And even if it's not an event specifically, it's the do nothing. It's like just getting people to come out. What do you think are some of your keys to success and growth? Like I know you're big, like you love technology, you love automations, like you even just looking at your Instagram page for Stereopunks, you've amassed thousands of followers. I'm sure your email and text list is probably pretty big at this point. Like, what are some of the things you've done to be able to grow a following and a fan base and a brand?
Yeah. Well, I think consistency, obviously, and I think for me, like what has always been important is growing those lists. So I think, there's two ways you can do that. You can either throw, really large events, a few times a year, and, pick up, 500 to 1,000 emails or, whatever it is per event. Or you could just have volume and sort of just like have them trickle in over that volume. So I've just like tried to keep this consistent calendar per month. And I think when I started with my residency at Kiss Kiss Bang Bang doing the Thursday nights, that was also like, oh, this is great. Like, we'll make most of these nights free. We'll have different talent driven nights. We'll have themed nights that obviously go with the disco kind of element that Kiss Kiss Bang Bang is. And I think just creating like stuff that's attractive for people, and that's why I think like for me, the events are sort of like onions to me. Like they have to have layers. They have to have like these elements that are, the venue's a big part, and the venue can play a big part. And I think like if you don't have like the most like the sexiest venue, then it's like, all right, well then your concept should be really, really solid. And then, if it's not either of those, then it's like, all right, well then your talent should be very, very enticing. And if all of that's different, then like maybe there's some sort of mission, maybe there's some sort of initiative, maybe there's like a charitable part to your event that it gets people to come out, or maybe there's some sort of a goal by the end of it that is interesting to people. So I think like you can have one of any of those, but if you have like multiple pillars going on in your event, like that's when you really have, I think, something that people get really really, really into.
And just like an onion, you want to make them cry.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you can elicit that sort of an emotion through the experience, I think why not? So, for me, it's been consistently trying to get better at building those pillars into every event.
Great. What I know we're probably a few minutes left here in this amazing conversation that could probably go on for hours. But what do you look for as far as talent? One of the things that I observe with your lineups are I'm constantly seeing artists I've never heard of on there, and either I'm just super out of touch or you're really good at finding new talent. So like, how do you find the talent? How do you decide they're good to play? Like, what's your selection process?
Yeah. Well, I think at this point now we get at least like the local support options. I get hit up by quite a few people. Sometimes my partners will suggest people. I think being an event organizer, there's things that people want from me, right? So there's like DJs that want to play, so they'll kind of get in touch. And having been sort of in the mix for 10 years has also helped. I just kind of know a lot of people. I think when it comes to like headline talent, like, I mean, I check like Resident Advisor like 2 or 3 times a week, just like scrolling like who's playing where. If there's names I don't recognize, I go look them up. I'm constantly like going and trying to find new talent on Spotify through, all of the algorithmic stuff that I get fed, or the, if I don't recognize a name, I try to familiarize myself. So I think like, again, just being active, being conscious with like, and intentional as far as like finding new talent, because I think like, that Never Dull show really showed me that I was very early, and being in this market, what happens is like talent develops, and at some point it's hard to essentially like get by them from the bigger promoters in the city. And so for me, it's like as a smaller promoter, like I have to be early on them. And so, I have to be sort of ahead of the talent buyers at Insomniac. I have to be sort of ahead of the talent buyers at Framework. I have to be ahead of like even some of these new guys like Stranger Than that are coming in, or Minimal Effort. Like these are all sort of competitors, but like it's also like kind of friendly. And like if I can throw a great party with Never Dull before anyone else does it, and like that leads him to then go get booked, a day trip I actually feel good
for a
about that
sold out
because
show. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
because it's like, okay, great. Like we were able to prove his selling power in the market to, these big shot like promoters that essentially need to know that they're going to have, that artist can sell as well. So, being early, being intentional with the research and just sort of, again, like I don't book everybody that like asks me to book
Sure.
them, but
Sure.
I certainly like log them, and like I don't ever delete emails. Like if you don't hear from me, it's not that you're never going to hear from me. It's just not the right fit, and I can't get back to everybody. So I'm sorry if you haven't gotten a response from me. But I will say, like every email I've ever gotten asking for someone to play my events is in a folder called DJs, and I go through that often. Like I just make sure to like go see like who's doing this, like what was that person's name, maybe they'd be good fit on this one, or like
That's great.
good fit on this. So
Yeah, and the headline talent certainly makes sense, especially with how, again, competitive LA is. Radius clauses already booked out. I mean, we dealt when we were doing our parties together. We dealt with that a lot. From like a local or support perspective, are there any specific like things you look for above all else, or things that might DQ an artist from playing? And even like last night, Mikey Lyon from Desert Hearts on Twitter, tweeting about like, if you want to play a show, come support. And people who hit us up to play pizza and techno, I'm like, hey, come out and meet us in person, and it's like prove how much you want to actually play. Like, what about you? How does it look?
I think, and it just sort of like comes down to, I guess, where in sort of the artist journey I sort of see the project. And then, obviously you want to have, I mean, like we're making an investment as a promoter. We're the one taking on the risk and making an investment in the DJ, with sort of the idea that like we're booking someone that is either going to bring people or sell tickets. That's sort of the whole idea of talent buying, right? So for me, like local support people, I tend to like working with people that don't play as often, because for me, if you are taking every gig in every part of the city that you possibly can, it usually means that like you've sort of like, I mean, you might have like incredible friends that just come support you at every gig, but if you're playing sort of to make a living, like usually what happens is like that's just your day job, and you don't necessarily treat it as like every event. Not every event is very special in regards to like making sure you promote it properly. You're just sort of providing the sounds for the night. I don't necessarily like those kind of DJs because, again, they just don't really push their gig, just even for themselves. Like forget about me. So that I would say, like, take DJs that are selective on the gigs they take. I think fit is also like, I get hit up by
like
DJs
what they wear.
Well,
no, but
I mean, it could. I mean, if you're wearing like tacky stuff, and maybe our tastes don't.
Pay attention, artists. Fashion is important.
If I feel like our tastes are like too different on something that I'm working on, it doesn't make sense. Like I still get sent emails from people being like, I'm a hard techno or like tech house DJ, and again, it's like people not doing their homework, not looking at like what sort of calendar I'm keeping and the types of events I'm doing.
Yep.
So people that have taken that forethought and looked into like what I do and how they can add value, that's a plus. And then I think in general, just people that are easy to work with. I try to book a lot of friends because I think like, we've met over a long period of time, and those friends have supported me in the same way I want to support them by booking them for a gig, or I think one thing when we were throwing parties, like we were very, very forward with people that were like, I want to play pizza and techno, and we're like, well, this one's booked, but please come support, and we can have a conversation there about maybe booking you for the next one, or how you want to get involved. Because I think like,
yep.
I'm not every party makes a ton of money, and not every party makes money in general. So it's like, I think the idea that every promoter is out here taking advantage of, the people that are involved as far as like DJs, I think is silly. Sometimes we do the party just to throw the party,
Right.
and I think like if not everybody's hands are on deck to make it work, it's not going to continue. Like, at the end of the day, it's got to at least break even and be a freaking great vibe for us, for at least for me to do it again. And so like people that want to get involved and like help build like the community or just build the event so that it can be something that can continue.
It's a tricky one, right? Like I think the ideal scenario for like an artist, for a DJ, is they get booked to play, they get paid a good healthy amount of money, and they don't have to do anything to promote the party, right? But that's fantasy land, right? I mean, so for me, when I thinking about like putting on a show and booking artists, I tried to balance that fine line between like, first of all, I wanted them to get paid appropriately, and I know in our industry it's hard to do that, and it gets watered down by DJs who will take a free gig, and so the bar gets lower and lower. But I don't want to be somebody who's only paying out on ticket sales. I want to provide a good base and then a little bit of incentive. Like, if you help us push the show, we'll reward you. But also, you want to play to people. You don't want to play to an empty dance floor, right? So being very upfront. What I respect and like about you, even just booking me as talent, for example, is you put everything out there. You'll tell me when the gig is, who else is on the lineup, what my set time is, what the pay is, and I just have to say yes or no. There's like really no follow-up question asked. You'll send an email with all the details confirming everything. Very professional, very buttoned up. I love that about you, and unfortunately that is not always common in the industry. And and then, but like when we were again like throwing the parties, like we'd get everybody together on a text message and text group, and it's kind of like a one team, one dream thing. Like, we're all pumping each other up, we're all helping each other promote and announce and all that, and it is really important. So thanks for kind of giving some insight into your thought process and everything there. I mean, I got dozens more questions, but I know I know you got to get going too. I mean, like, how are you feeling as a future dad? Are you nervous, excited? And then like, how do you think that's going to shape your future as, somebody working in music? Like, what does family Jake look like?
Yeah. I mean, very excited. I'm not too nervous. We actually did a baby class this last weekend.
Never stop learning, Jake.
Well, that was a question, and I think like the question was like, what are you nervous about? My answer, not to sound like I'm like nothing worries me, but I was just like, I'm very much someone who takes life as it comes at me and sort of problem solve from there. At least on things I can't control. I can't control really anything yet. I don't know. She's not here, and I don't know what sort of parenting it's going to require right away. So I think for me, it's like, just be prepared. I'm not too worried, because I think in general, it's like, it's a little child. Like, I think once they start walking, then it becomes, stressful, because it's like, where the hell is she? But I think how is it going to sort of affect everything I'm doing and where we go from here? I mean, obviously a lot less sleep, a little less time, sort of prioritizing family and prioritizing my energy so that it sort of is use the best. I'm reading the 80-20 principle right now, which is the Pareto principle, Pareto's law. 20% of your activity is what accounts for 80% of your output, essentially. Or the result, I guess. Yeah, input to output. So like, I really do think like, even just reading that book and realizing like my time will be limited, it's just going to have to be more buttoned up and put to use more efficiently. And I think for music, that means like, having set hours, being a little more firm on when I log off in the day, delegating better, building teams and systems so that I can have the confidence that, the rest of, the tasks that need to get done are being finished by, if it's me or my team members. So I think it's only going to drive me more, honestly, to be more efficient, be better, and just keep going.
Do we have a name picked out yet?
We do. I can't share it. My wife would kill me.
All right,
But
no
I
name
think
yet.
I very much like it, and I'm hoping that that's what the name is. So, Katie,
Okay,
if you're
all right.
watching,
Stay tuned. Stay
please.
tuned, folks. We got quite a cliffhanger here. And are you? Do you? I mean, I don't know what your parenting philosophy will be, but are you hopeful that your daughter will get involved in music as well? Are you maybe going to try to train her or give her lessons or anything like that? And I know that's future state, but like, any thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, my parents tried to give us like a well-rounded sort of childhood and experience. We sort of said no to, like, I fought piano lessons and loved sports. So like I
Yeah.
think like it'll be similar where we'll just present things, see what she gets attached to, and obviously I'm going to share my love of music. She's going to have great taste. I'll tell you that.
When she's our age, she's gonna be like, "Yeah, my dad had all these amazing records, and that's what got me into music."
Yeah.
It just repeats itself. So, well, that's exciting, man. I'm super stoked for you, and just as a friend and peer, appreciate everything you've done and for me, and in the relationship we've built, and in just spending an hour of your time chatting with me here. So hopefully everyone listening, this was helpful. And follow Jake, follow Clavette, follow Stereo Punks. If you're in LA, go to his parties. They're awesome. And yeah, let's maybe smile for the camera, say hi. I'll take a screenshot of this, and then yeah. Oh, that's cool. What is that?
I forgot you can do that. That's my camera.
Oh, that's cool. All right. Well, thank you for listening, everybody, and we'll catch you next time. Peace.
Thanks again.